The legendary Sannin are really strong, and depending on what time period of Naruto you're talking about, it wouldn't even be far-fetched to say that they represented the pinnacle of power for the series. When you look at all the high tiers in part 1, all 3 of them hold positions in the top 5 living characters, with statements even going as far to say that when dealing with a member of the Prodigal 3, you need another member to take them on. And that's essentially their mythos. They're the top 3 in the world, however there is one character that will always be a stain on their legacy, that being the one who gave them their legend, Hanzo of the Salamander. Hanzo is one of the most underrated characters in Naruto, not only in power but also in popularity, despite being arguably one of the more enigmatic characters in the verse, which is why today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Hanzo to understand why he was so revered in his prime and what ultimately led to his downfall. Huge shout out, however, to my boy Salamander for requesting this video. If you want to do so yourself, you can check out my bio for more information. But that's pretty much it for the intro. Make sure to like this video and subscribe. Appreciate y'all for 10k, so the next goal is 20. Now, when speaking about Hanzo, the most logical point to start with is his relationship with the legendary Sannin. As I stated in the intro, Hanzo was the one who gave them their legend. However, when I said that, I meant it in the most literal of terms. During Jiraiya's flashback, we get a scene from before the trio were called the Sannin, where Hanzo declared them as strong and gave them the title of the 3 great shinobi of Konoha, also referred to as the legendary Sannin. He then tells them to refer to themselves as such in return for having spared their lives. The third databook basically reiterates this by saying that his name is legendary and he stands alone at the summit. Hanzo, the famed ninja who raced across battlefields, riding the salamander he had summoned. During the Second Great Shinobi World War, he coined the name of the 3 great shinobi for Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru and spread their fame throughout the lands. This already establishes Hanzo as narratively above the prime Sannin, which the specifics of that I'll get into in a bit, but he also just has statements of basically being unbeatable. When interrogating the Rain Ninja, Jiraiya questions him about the civil war that was supposed to be happening there, and the shinobi informs him that the civil war was over since Pain defeated Amagakure all by himself. Jiraiya, upon hearing that, is completely shocked, with sweat dripping down his face, saying that this was unbelievable. No matter how powerful Pain might be, there were truly no shinobi that didn't know the name of the previous Amagakure leader, Hanzo of the Giant Salamander. He then reaffirms his previous claim, saying that it's unbelievable that Pain could take down Hanzo by himself. The reason this is so significant though is because Jiraiya doesn't say stuff like this about anybody. And remember, he doesn't know about Pain at this point, so it's not like he's comparing their power. He truly believes that it's completely ridiculous for someone to take down Hanzo by themselves. It makes you wonder if he feels the same about other people he knows, such as Hiruzen, Minato, Orochimaru, and Itachi, etc. But that is just conjecture though, so take it with a grain of salt. Now, when looking at Hanzo himself, we can establish a floor of power with the legendary Sannin. As I said earlier, Hanzo should definitively be above the prime Sannin, as well as their later base versions leading up to the war arc. And I said specifically pre-war arc since Orochimaru gained a body almost completely composed of Hashirama cells. Hashirama cells are known to amp both physicals and jutsu, so Orochimaru should be unquantifiably amped, and as such we can't really use him for any of the scaling chains. Now, the reason why I specifically said their prime versions is because the Sannin that fought Hanzo were more than likely in their physical primes. In her fight against Kabuto, Tsunade notes that Kabuto's jutsu instincts and sharpness surpass her even in her prime, suggesting that at that point in the series, she was already past her prime. We also know that she contracted her phobia during the Second Great Shinobi War after the death of Dan, which would be a massive nerf, so seeing as though she fought Hanzo during the Second War, it's most likely that her prime was during that same war before Dan's death. and seen as though the Sannin should all be relative and kept their relativity all the way into their post-prime versions, it's likely that they all hit their prime at the same time as well. But what does this do for Hanzo? Well, not much, but it basically scales him above anybody that's relative to or below any of the Sannin in base. This would include characters such as old Hiruzen, given that Orochimaru was able to fight on par with him and force him to use a kamikaze attack. Hiruzen is then stated to be the strongest Kage among the 5 great nations, which would put the base Sannin and by extension Hanzo above them as well. However, this line of scaling is a bit shaky since the statement was made in part 1 before Gaara was Kazekage, and it's possible that the other Kage got stronger over the time skip. But while this may be the case, it's sort of a narrative implication that Konoha is just above the other villages and the Hokage is usually the strongest out of the 5 Kage. I will admit that this is a very weak argument, since being the strongest of the 5 Kage doesn't mean that you're above the 5 Kage as a whole. He should also upscale off of Four Tails Naruto, seen as though both Jiraiya and nerfed Orochimaru were relative to him. Orochimaru was able to contend physically with Four Tails Naruto, being able to temporarily restrain one of his chakra arms as well as land punches directly to his face. Four Tails Naruto obviously still had the upper hand in these exchanges, however Jiraiya should just be directly relative, seen as though he subdued him, and based on Jiraiya's own words, live capture is way harder than just killing someone. It's unsure the method with which Jiraiya used to suppress him, given that he had the suppression seals. However, he instructed Kakashi to place the seal before the second tail sprouted, so it sort of implies that the seals get less effective the more chakra that gets released. This is also consistent with the fact that Yamato was chosen specifically for his ability to suppress the Nine Tails chakra, which leads into the idea that you need a higher level of chakra suppression for those higher levels of chakra, because then what would be the point of Yamato when you could just slap a seal on Naruto at any time to reverse the effects? As for the higher versions of the Sannin, the relativity argument gets thrown out the window, since nothing suggests that the Sannin's higher forms amp them to the same degree. The degree to which the Hydra, Sage Mode, and 100 Healings boost their power is pretty unquantifiable. Sage Mode has that 10 times multiplier statement, which is shady in and of itself, but even if we know the quantification for that, it doesn't really tell us anything about the others, especially since it's entirely possible that all of them gained those transformations after they split up and stopped fighting alongside each other. However, there is an argument to be made that Hanzo is above Sage Mode Jiraiya. There are no direct statements saying this, but based on Jiraiya's statement of nobody being able to take down Hanzo by themselves, and the fact that Jiraiya should be knowledgeable about himself and his capabilities, you could argue that he was including himself in that statement. You can also argue that Sage Mode Jiraiya isn't by himself, since he needs Ma and Pa to use Sage Mode. However, it's stated that animals and insects used as part of a ninja's jutsu are the same as any other weapon or tool. Whether or not this extends to sage animals is up for debate, but there is another way to get Hanzo above Sage Jiraiya, and that's through pain. If you're one of the 3 Hanzo fans out there, including my boy Salamander, then you already know the infamous Pain statement. After being reanimated in the 4th Great Shinobi War, we get introduced to the dynamic between Mifune and Hanzo, with Mifune being a past opponent of Hanzo who was defeated but had his life spared, just like the legendary Sannin. During their clashes, Mifune notes that from their first exchange, he could tell why someone like Hanzo, who was strong, though Hanzo wasn't aware of the reason. We then get a flashback of the moment Hanzo died, and Pain says the same thing before killing him. He didn't even know why he lost. It's then revealed that the only reason he lost to Pain and was struggling against Mifune was because he lost his conviction. Hanzo then asks the question of why he got cut down this time, and Mifune responds with one of the best speeches in the series, saying that your conviction is warped. You do not hone yourself as a weapon, you no longer improve. you have lost your sharpness, and thus your blade became sullied with blood, rusted, its edge dulled. A blunt sword does not last. Remember, people are like swords. The irony of the situation is that Hanzo was the one who originally preached about convictions, so him falling down into what he despised is sort of poetic. Now, the obvious implications from this is that if Hanzo had not abandoned his convictions, then he wouldn't have lost the pain, and with there being like no anti-feats for Hanzo, there really is no reason to discredit it, especially since it's stated by Pain himself. I also don't think I need to explain how strong Pain is. We already know he was undefeated, leader of the Akatsuki, top 2 in the Akatsuki, above Sage Mode Jiraiya, and relative to Sage Mode Naruto, etc. And as I said, he had no anti-feats in his prime, so technically he could be any unquantifiable degree above Pain. I do also want to mention that his conviction was to take over the whole world and unify it, so him being the strongest in the world in his prime doesn't seem that far-fetched, especially with the fact that immediately upon restoring his conviction, he just disobeys the orders of the Edo Tensei ceiling tags, which is pretty impressive. Now, as it relates to his arsenal, he really isn't that diverse of a guy. On a base level, with the help of his respirator, he's unmatched in underwater combat, even with people like Kisame running around. His main weapon, however, aside from his sickle and chain, is his poison. It's stated that the salamander venom that he coats his blades with kills you within 48 hours of entering your body, which is around the same potency of Satoru's poison. His salamander can also produce poison, which is also pretty cool. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the video. Again, huge shout out to my boy Salamander for requesting the video, and as always, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye, B.